this shit? Give me back my aux cord. It's the Large Blast podcast. I'm your host, Stoney, and I'm joined as always by Welshie.
Call that a hammer? This is a hammer.
And Matt.
Strike while the iron is hot.
And we're here today to talk about all things Warhammer, in particularly Vulkan, and we'll get on to him in a bit, because first we like to get things kicked off with a little something we call Hobbies Goings On, where we take a little look at what's been going on in the host's hobby lives. So, Matt, I saw you licking a paintbrush earlier. That's a good sign. What have you got there?
Well, yeah, I've put the paintbrushes away. They need to be cleaned. That's the job for the next hobby progress. But
they were dirty and you were just giving them all a good lick.
Yeah.
Flavour of what's been going on.
They've been busy. They've been, well, sort of busy, busier than recent episodes. I've finished a Knight, which I've been working on for fucking ages, which I'm really pleased about. That's Bretonnian Knight. And now I'm working on multiple other projects, including the 3D printed selection of yours, Stoney, which is working their way in the background.
I see you trying to throw me a bone after giving me some Bretonnian news up top there.
Yeah.
One day you're going to say, and it's a Knight Callistus or one of the other.
The
Imperial.
Well, I was going to say I've also been busy with looking after my own little knight, which has joined our family. Or, I mean, I personally think he's more of a little primarch myself. So I'm fulfilling the role of the emperor and fatherhood.
He hasn't
so I've been
busy.
busy.
Child.
No, I haven't done that.
Our subscription has gone up by
Someone
one.
didn't leave a child on your doorstep and were like, raise this.
Yeah. No. He hasn't been lost in his what do they call them? Primordial pouch or whatever, where they got thrown into the warp by the chaos powers. I'm holding on to mine. Yeah.
So Matt is a dad for anyone that couldn't understand for that.
In English.
Yeah. Welshie, what have you been up to?
Well, gents, I've been laid at home for a couple of weeks for some medical reasons I won't go too much into, but I haven't been able to do much other than sit on the sofa. So I have been smashing through the hobby. I have all of those jobs that I hate doing, like base coating multiple colors and painting trim and all of that stuff. I love to do when I'm stuck on the sofa. If I'm painting properly, I want to do a good job with the standard method. I like to sit at my proper well-lit desk in my nice chair, but I haven't been able to do that. So I've been on the sofa just base coating. So I've painted 10 Chaos Space Marines, all the trim, contrast paint over lead belcher. There's a video of that on our YouTube. And I've even painted the Screamer Killer Carnifex, which I said I would never do because I hated the model. But over time, it has grown on me.
It's grown on you. This is, the old Screamer Killer, the classic redo, which we besmirched so cruelly only maybe 7 or 8 episodes ago. I don't know how long it's been, but we were so cruel about the Screamer Killer, and now it's out the box. It's on the painting rack.
Yeah, impressive.
It's off the painting rack, boys. It's done.
It's done.
Waiting to be based. Because things like that, right? My Tyranids paint scheme I've worked on, well, since I started playing 40K again back at the end of 7th. And I can just kind of do it in my sleep now. Spray it grey, dry brush it, lighter grey, contrast wash, paint the carapace brown, and then do the fiddly little gold bits. It's just a nice thing to do. Every now and then I love returning to a Tyranids model, and I've actually enjoyed painting the Screamer Killer. It's a nice model. You can get to all the bits. It's not too fiddly. I'll never play it in a game because it's massive. You can shoot it from like anywhere on the table with its stupid sticking out arms. But
I was going to say, in some ways, what makes it fun to paint is what makes it a bad model to play on the table.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, its rules are rubbish, and you can see it from absolutely everywhere. I
can see it from here. We're doing this over Zoom. I can see it.
I put it next to a Redemptor Dreadnought, and it's at least 50% wider than a Dreadnought, so you ain't hiding it anywhere. But I have enjoyed it. It's got a kind of that old school stupid 40K look that's missing from quite a lot of things these days. So I've enjoyed that. I've been powering through stuff. Hopefully I'll get back to my normal painting regime soon, and I can finish your Inquisition-esque models, Stoney. That's next up on the list.
Well, that's good. Well, you better finish them off quick, Welshie, because I've got some more models coming for your way now, quite soon. That's right. I've just finished printing you off some Noise Boys. The Noise Boy Lord in particular, because he is finished, he is done, he's ready to go.
He will be going straight to the pile for your upcoming video, don't you worry.
Yes. Yeah, so basically, a lot of my hobby progress has just been doing stuff with the Noise Boys, getting the video ready, things like that. Like I've got like it's one of those things where like whenever you're doing something like on your own for like a long period of time and you're like the only person looking at something, you kind of after a while, you know, it's a bit like practicing guitar on your own or something like that. After a while, like you go through these different phases of being like,
Yeah.
this is the nuts to being like, what am I doing? This is bullshit. You know, like you go through the real
Yeah.
the range of emotions with that, and I was really like I was doing the video for my Noise Boys stuff, and obviously doing that I had to like edit down some of my like ZBrush, you know, the filming of the process basically, and all of this. And halfway through, I was like, these are wank. I fucking hate these models. I don't like them. like I've just looked at them for too long, you know. But like, and I was kind of thinking about doing a bunch more to them and whatnot. But then I sort of posted them on some sites and things and got some feedback. And I think that that's an important piece of advice I could give to anybody that's doing stuff that is kind of self-motivated. You know, a lot of the things that I do are kind of self-motivated. I've done myself, you know, and you can go through these kind of whenever you're the only person looking at it, it can be a bit deceptive. So it's always good to get other opinions on things is kind of my takeaway for the week. But also, another thing I did was I started an Instagram again.
Oh,
Stoney's back on Instagram. So if you're listening, make sure you go over and subscribe to Large Blast Stoney, I think it is. I don't know, maybe you're subscribed to also Meds Paints. Is it Meds
I'll put it
Paints?
on the main channel, don't you worry.
Yeah, there's Meds Paints and there's Rule Bretonia. Unsubscribe from those. Start another account. Come over to me. So subscribe to Stoney twice. Forget the Large Blast podcast account. What's that about? It's bobbins, mate. Just a bunch of thumbnails. Get over to Stoney's. That's where the shit's going down.
Finance, cutting-edge technology. Accurate information is the Large Blast podcast news. Hear every episode.
White Dwarf is old, 500 episodes old now, and they're celebrating with a bunch of shit, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a big old thick White Dwarf issue 500 coming out on the shelves soon, which they've previewed. And there's been a few articles on Warhammer Community with just the staff reminiscing about some old issues and things they like. I know Matt posted on our Large Blast Twitter page recently one of a battle he really loved. So I thought we could just take a moment to reminisce about some of our White Dwarf memories.
yeah,
yes.
big day.
Well, Matt, I think that you're probably the person that's read White Dwarf the most consistently out of the three of us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I kind of dropped off it for the last year. For me, the golden era was the end of third edition to fifth edition to the end of fifth edition. So like 2002, when they would be half full of Lord of the Rings stuff at the same time as the movies were coming out, which was really cool. You could see the product development and the product ranges for that as we were going through that phase of all being obsessed with the films that we could see in the cinema. And Warhammer evolving, and it's that peak era. So yeah, 2002 to like, I don't know, 2005, 2006, where, you know, you would find a cardboard tube in the pages of White Dwarf, and there would be all of the stuff we've spoken about before. And that's my fondest. And there are elements coming back into the magazine now, which are great. And it's just, I have very fond memories of reading that magazine growing up, wherever I was on holiday. Generally, it was when I was on holiday, I'd have the magazine and be reading it. And some of the magazines, I know particular things in my head that I just kept coming back to and flicking through. You know, I've kept them all. Yeah, so some of them.
Helm's Deep diorama talking
Oh
about
yeah,
the Lord of the Rings
yeah,
movie.
yeah. That's a
That
good.
one
That's a,
and the
yeah. That's a good one.
The Helm's Deep I've managed to find over the years, but the other one that I remember was they had a table that was the bridge of Khazad-dûm that was kind of 5 foot high off the ground and just a tiny bridge and just all polyfoam and
brilliant.
It had a real Blue Peter feel to it, I think, of like here's how you build your own stuff. I know we've probably talked about this to death using trash to make scenery, but it did have a real kind of hobbyist feel as opposed to a promotional magazine, which it is now. And I still like that. I love seeing the artwork that people do in their, you know, the paint jobs, the heavy metal stuff, but it doesn't quite have the feel it used to. I read it every month still. But it does feel like it's lost a little bit of that personality over the years.
Yeah. the heavy metal stuff is still really good in the
Does
magazine.
anybody remember, and this is probably a callback to like the Nico days, because I bet Nico would remember this, but that is the roll-on deodorant tube that they made into like a land speeder type
yeah,
thing. A
classic.
Sorry, land
Yeah.
That
speeder,
was,
yeah.
oh
Land
yeah,
speeder.
it was like a cool car kind of thing. Like,
I mean,
that was great.
that is very Blue Peter, isn't it? That,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. Plus, they know that teenage boys are all slathered to the nines in roll-on deodorant.
Yeah.
I used to love the battle reports as well. That
Oh,
looked
yeah.
like World War One, World War Two, like stick and push kind of boards. It was just like blocks with a logo in the middle.
The
arrows,
before photographs were good enough.
So
now it's
good.
just like work out what's happening. Like bring them back. Again, it's that kind of homemade feel. Now it's all so professionally shot with professional scenery and zoomed in on the models, and I just don't know what it is. And I'm sure that probably appeals to more people, right? But every now and then, let's have a real nostalgic one. I hope this issue's got some good kind of throwback content in.
It'd be quality if they did a new era rules, but in the old style. Yeah, in the old style battle reports.
I
remember
did do one of those a few issues ago, where they kind of pretended to go back. But
what about this, right? Do you reckon it would be possible to play like a generational game of Warhammer? So the first turn you're playing second edition rules.
That's quite fun. That's quite a fun idea.
Rules.
Yeah.
So do you reckon that would be
great?
Like, do you think you could do? Like, I mean, obviously you'd have to have like 10 turns or whatever to get to.
Yeah, but you could really amp it up, because you could have units in Deep Strike that only come into existence as the next edition happens.
Oh shit!
Deep Strike turn 2.
You have to use accurate models as well for the time. And that'd be quite good, because like as everyone knows, as editions changes, some units become really shit. So you might have like a unit of, I don't know, whatever Gene Stealers say, that are shit on the first round and fucking hone everything on the second round.
I've got to keep them alive till 8th.
It's funny though, thinking about this magazine where it's, I was sort of talking about the era of White Dwarf for me is like 20 years ago, and Stoney, you're what, 166 is what?
I mean, that's 1994 when that
edition.
So like this is almost another planet to now. Like I remember White Dwarf, where you would get your monthly White Dwarf, and you would find out about Games Workshop is telling you we're going to raise prices on this products in like 2 months' time. That's where you got that information from. You didn't really have the internet, and the designers' commentary, previews about stuff coming out, stuff being dropped from the ranges. I mean, you
literally had to get the order numbers out the back of the catalogue and like, bring them up and be like, hello, can I have 163?
And they did have like the weird catalogue bits in the magazine, as well as the catalogues.
And little tokens and stuff sometimes as well.
Oh yeah, the tokens.
The thing that I've always wondered, I don't know what your guys' view on this, I've always kind of wished, being as I'm a straight 40k player, I have no interest in Old World. I never did. I love Lord of the Rings, but Old World doesn't really matter to me. I've always wondered why they have both in every issue, because I would much prefer to buy the alternate issues, even if they were double the price, if it just contained like only 40k.
Well, I guess
I wonder why they've never done that.
I mean, my initial thought was, I guess it keeps it subscription consistent, but like I guess it doesn't if it's just spreading the same amount of people that would read it over 2 different episodes. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have thought that as well. Like whenever I I want to pick up this 500th one just because of what it is, but I've had a few in the last, I don't know, 6 months, and I just really haven't read them. And I know what you mean, and I skimmed through the 40k stuff. There's no Old World stuff in the ones that I've got, and at AOS I don't even look at the pictures really.
I meant AOS and Old World, yeah.
So I know what you mean.
What do you reckon's the oldest one you got, Matt?
Certainly not as old as 166. I don't know, like 2001. 2001.
When I got my Warhammer subscription, you could White Dwarf subscription way back when I was a wee boy. Like you could order back. You got like 6 back catalogs as well. And I remember I ordered like the earliest one, and it was like episode 13 or something.
Oh, cool.
And it had all like the rules for like advanced Space Crusading and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
They used to have the proper illustrated covers, didn't they? Like
They did,
genuinely
yeah.
individually illustrated
Yeah,
covers.
but it was proper black and white. Like there was no like color pages in there or anything.
That's
I
something
mean-
that I miss in the modern ones. Actually, even the covers now, you very rarely get a page of art in
Yeah.
there anymore. It's all
Yeah.
photography.
The only thing I don't know. I mean, it's a nostalgia thing, most certainly. But when I do flick back through the old White Dwarfs, actually having the range of different game systems in the magazine adds to the nostalgia feel. Even though I really only was reading the magazines when I was into Lord of the Rings and 40K. This is all after my Warhammer fantasy phase. Having like the Inquisitor, so they had like Inquisitor stuff. They had Battlefleet Gothic,
Yeah.
and actually having the range of stuff. And I don't know, like
I mean, do they do the minor games in White Dwarf? Is there
they still
Necromunda
do,
part and stuff?
but I would lump those in with I would say that the split would make a lot of people happy. I would take Battlefleet Gothic with Necromunda with my 40k. Like I'm not saying only 40k.
okay.
yeah,
All right,
yeah, have
okay.
the setting, yeah,
the setting rather than the
So
game system.
I know that because I mean, and when you look through a White Dwarf, it illustrates how much Games Workshop are trying to bring they're leveraging the nostalgia feel on their product ranges. They're bringing back all of those games that they dropped. It's really evident when you look through an old White Dwarf what they're doing.
They're making metal models, like
Yeah. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, you're right. There's
Yeah.
definitely been a big nostalgia trip going on over at Games Workshop recently, it seems.
Yeah, and there's been some failures when they went
Sure.
to like the month. They went to weekly magazine, and it's terrible. That was like the beginning of 7th edition, I think. And they did used to have a split magazine for this. What do they call them? The specialty games. I mean, that's like 18 years ago. So maybe it just didn't work. Who knows?
It's
I
funny
think
that
there's
it's
still decent content and White Dwarf's worth getting, but I would say something I've noticed over the past year is just flip through it before you buy it and check there's enough content for you in there, because it can be a
that's a
bit
good
hit and
idea.
miss as to what you get with it.
I mean, I guess that the range has become more diverse as well. I mean, that's the problem for having one magazine that's the outlet. I mean, back in the old days, it would be like, 40k and fantasy, and then, some of other games that really didn't need to take up a whole lot of space at all. But especially if Warhammer Fantasy's coming back and we've got Age of Sigmar and 40k, that's a lot to cram into one magazine, really, isn't it?
Did they ever do an annual? I remember like magazines when I was a kid used to do the yearly kind of Christmas annual.
They did when I was
they did.
They did the Citadel miniature annual, so it was just a
Right.
picture of all the heavy metal models through the year, so that had appeared in White Dwarf and stuff. So it was a bit like, do you guys remember when Games Workshop did that? What was it called?
It was called Visions.
Yeah, that was when White Dwarf was a weekly magazine, and then they had that one, which was a monthly magazine.
And it was really thick.
Yeah.
That was fucking awesome. I had a bunch of them when they came out. I remember because that was like around the time when I was kind of getting back into 40k, and I didn't have that many friends that played 40k, so I would just go out and that magazine was kind of like my mate that played 40k, so I can sit there and be like, look at these cool models, I fucking wish I could remember what that was called. I'll put it in a text to speech or whatever, but it's really annoying me. But like that was awesome. I really enjoyed that. But that's what the old annuals were like. They were called the Heavy Metal, 1995 annual or whatever, and it was just all the shit that had been in White Dwarf, basically, that the Heavy Metal team had painted.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So while you've mentioned friends getting into 40k, I'll just give a shout out to Jamonj, my mate from secondary school. Played his first full game of 40k, only 500 points, but on the table, first game in years today. So
nice.
Hell yeah, Jamonj.
Good to have you on board.
Kiss your free expending money goodbye. Darktide, the computer game based on the video game, is now releasing a board game. It's Inception of games. What's going on? So we've got a board game of Darktide, the video game based on the tabletop game Warhammer / maybe Ben Necromunda.
Yeah, I think you've basically summed it up. But they've made a little boxed game of Darktide, which it's just weird to me. Like, play Blackstone Fortress.
I mean,
if you want a game that's a bit like
probably
this.
for people that really like like Darktide, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
your easy way into Black. I think some of these models are from Blackstone Fortress, aren't they?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
are. But
Yeah.
that
Are
but
all of them, Matt? You're the Blackstone Fortress guy. The Ogrin and the Kazkin aren't, are they?
no. So two of them. But the Primaris Psyker is available in an expansion pack they don't sell anymore.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know. I saw this. I thought it's quite interesting. It's a bit like that Captain Titus game that they brought out that we played at Christmas. That was really
terrible though. Hopefully this is better.
Yeah,
Than the
that
Captain
wasn't
Titus
really
game.
wasn't really a game. I mean, this is a game. I mean, I quite like when Games Workshop do this, but I do. Part of me does think it's a bit of a like. There's some models in there that you can no longer buy, or they're very hard to get hold of. It's another way of them selling it, and that's really the real reason.
It's an entry drug, right? This is the guy on the street corner pushing weeds to get you hooked onto the real plastic crap.
Yeah.
Oh, you like the board? You like the computer game? Try this board game. You only have to paint 4 models, or you don't.
Yeah,
they're already
it's all
color-coded.
it's all very achievable, and if you're buying this, you've got a nice mix of, do I want to be a Blackstone Fortress style model gamer or a 40K style model gamer? But I mean, we're looking at a picture of the game all unboxed on the board and the miniatures and everything, and it looks shite. What's this board about? It looks really boring. There's too many dice for how small this board is. It looks like it's going to be a bunch of boring ass rolling dice and moving counters about. Doesn't look fun.
No, the card thing that they've got originally from Kill Team, which is now rolled into 40K with your data sheet on like a small A5 bit of paper. I like that. That really does make the game easier. I've played a lot of kind of entry games with people and it helps. But you're right, there's no theming on the board itself. It's just 2 oblongs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why my, skeptical mind leans towards it's another way for them to sell models they've already designed. So the Psyker you can't buy, but now you can if you spend 50 quid or whatever this game is. So suddenly a lot of Imperial Guard players will be like, that Psyker model's great. I want that Psyker model. Fuck it. I'll buy it for 50 quid and I'll try and sell the rest on eBay. Games Workshop have just made 50 quid. Brilliant. The Pius Vaughn, who's the character with the flamer, I saw people talking on the Sister Battle Facebook group saying like that, now we've got another way to get her because you can play her in the Codex. Not really sure, not really up to speed with that side of everything, but a lot of people were saying that they wanted that figure. The Blackstone Fortress, I think you can still buy is like £95. So Games Workshop bringing this in for like 45, 50 quid. Suddenly people are like, yeah, fuck it, I'll buy it. And
with the 2 most
to be fair, I'm not paying 50 quid for it, but if it's like 25, 30, I probably would because I like all 4 of these miniatures and I don't have any of them. And
is this 50 quid? Because
no, that's my supposition. All
right, cool. I can feel that. Hey, hang on,
all your jets, sir. Don't worry, if it is 50 quid, it'll be straight back in the news in a few episodes.
Yeah.
Rolling in my 6-4.
Hello. Your call cannot be taken at the moment, so please leave your message after the tone.
Dear gentlemen of fire, Forge Masters of the Large Blast podcast, purveyors of truth, justice, and all-round badassery, I need your help in forging words to appeal to the stuttering ember of what used to be my brother Gilliman's soul. I told my sons I shall return at the end times, in the moment of the Imperium's greatest peril. Female cust, I mean, war on all fronts. Hive fleets, Necrons ascendant, ethereal chatter of a new demon being forged in the warp. He needs me, my brother. He needs power. He needs a galaxy-wide, fair trade production initiative. And he needs me to lead it. Please help me convince him of this necessity. Tell him why I'm the right guy for the job. It's likely humanitarian aid is our only hope.
And don't forget to subscribe to Large Blast Stony on Instagram.
All right, boys, so you heard the voicemail message there. We got a message from old Vulkan, and he needs us to convince Guliman, the lamest of all Primarchs, that he needs fair trade weapons. He needs weapons, and he needs them done fairly and traded well.
Hey, yeah. Well, I guess we better look through his history, do what we normally do, run down, and then at the end we can chat about whether we think he's the man for the job and how we're convinced the Smurf that that's the way to go, I suppose. Let's look into his early life and what happened to him in the Horus Heresy then. Jump in.
Yeah, start at the beginning.
In it. Yeah, it's a very good place to start. So, as with all of the Primarchs, as we know, chaos intercedes, or does it? And the Primarchs get fired off into the warp, and they all land in different places, Superman style. Some of them get lucky, some of them not so lucky. So, Vulkan arrives on a planet called Nocturne, and it's a fairly sound planet. There's a bit of kind of slavery happens, a bit of class system, a bit of caste. But he gets pretty lucky, and he gets raised by a blacksmith named Nobel. So as soon as he's found, there's this odd-looking black baby. We should define black baby because I'm sure we'll reference it a few times. He is charcoal skinned, is how he's described in the book.
Because it's like a lava planet, right? It's all lava-y and volcano-y and shit.
Yeah, think of that one from Star Wars, is episode 3.
Oh yeah.
I have the high ground, Anakin. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
I've written some notes here actually on the skin color and the native population of Nocturne, and it's
super racist.
Caramel skinned beauties.
So I've written a note here which is interesting because I didn't know, Welshie, that he was actually that color before he landed on Nocturne. Because I've written here that the Salamander's Space Marines, as a result of a reaction between their genetics and the high levels of radiation present on Nocturne with the volcanic churning, as we've said, have a dark or jet black skin, which sort of implies that the native population doesn't.
Yeah, I think that it comes from his gene seed.
Which would explain why he is that colour before he gets to the planet. Yeah.
Oh, so he was ashen black before he got to Nocturne.
That's the implication, yeah, from the things that I've read. And also red-eyed as well, which is pretty cool. Like blazing fire behind his eyes is what it's described as. I
should imagine that the on Nocturne, everyone's just really badly, horribly blistered and burned, right? They're just like red because they're just, doesn't matter what colour you were before, you're just a blister because you live on a fucking lava planet.
But he has this real kind of ashen grey colour. And also kind of lucky that he ends up in this blacksmith's kind of parents, is that he has this inbuilt knowledge of forging techniques, which I think Matt's going to talk a bit more about later, so I won't go too much into. But he's brought up by a blacksmith, and he knows how to make stuff just kind of genetically and innately, which is pretty cool. And soon he's like making stuff and teaching people on the planet how to make things that they didn't even know was possible to make. So he has this kind of inbuilt ability. But the kind of downside.
It's like we've talked a little bit before about like how maybe it was the chaos gods that like shot these guys out to their various different planets. And I mean, I guess this is a nature nurture question at the end of the day, but it does seem like all of the Primarchs that landed on their planet seem to become very good at being on that planet. You know, almost like there was some kind of plan behind it beyond making a cool story.
When we get towards the Siege of Terror end of this kind of history recap for Vulkan, you'll see that becomes almost completely apparent in one direction, but I won't give that away just yet. So one of the downsides of this planet that he lives on is that it's ravaged by Dark Eldar pirate fleets coming in and taking people away to do God knows what and stealing stuff. And this happens over and over again as he's growing up. And at some point he decides to take a stand. Everyone there has their own hiding place. Think like a kind of tornado shelter. When the Dark Eldar come, people hide. And they've got these like kind of well-forged secret doors that they all get behind and stuff.
Oh, it's like Viking raids.
Yeah, definitely. And Vulkan goes full Viking because when he gets to kind of adolescence, he's had enough of this, and he takes out and dual wields 2 blacksmith hammers, one over each shoulder, and kills 100+ Dark Eldar by himself as like a teenager. And that inspires everyone to come out of their hiding spaces and like fight off Dark Eldar.
I love these stories about the Primarchs because it always... I know I say it in every Primarch episode, but I just love the idea of this giant superhuman appearing. Well, they're a baby, but I read...
He's like 15, he's got like a shit mustache, and like baggy trousers on, and like his brother's t-shirt or whatever.
I read for Vulkan that by by the time he was 3, bearing in mind, as well as you said, he's in like a blacksmith family, working in the forge, learning the craft. By the age of 3, he's like twice the height of a man.
Yeah.
Something ridiculous. And like everyone thinks this is totally normal. And none of these guys end up in a freak show. They all just carry on. Anyway, yeah.
I guess in some planets, like, because I think about this as well, like some planets aren't touched, right? They're kind of weird planets. So you think about where the lion is, right? He's a massive dude that appears on a planet without any attachment to the outside galaxy. But if you're on a planet that's frequently getting raided by Xenos, maybe a kind of weird guy falling from the sky isn't the strangest thing.
Yeah,
I think there's probably differences as to like how,
that's true.
Sees God and that kind of thing, but it depends on like where you land, I think.
Yeah.
Sure. And I mean, especially if he's like just like the classic hero story, a lot of these, aren't they? It's like a guy out of place befriends, everyone's just like, oh, that's the cool guy. It makes more sense that they become either the savior or the town fool in a lot of ways, doesn't it? They've got to be one end of the spectrum. It's very rare that you'd go like if Vulkan just became a baker or something or Nocturne, then that would be harder to believe in some ways.
He'd have some different weapons, that's for sure.
Yeah. Just like, oh, someone's really smashed the shit out of this bread. Like, yeah.
He'd be throwing a pizza tray like the guy with the hat on Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
So, but the point on his size is quite good, Matt. We'll make it here that he is by far of the Primarchs, and this is like people argue over who was the biggest. This is like straight up said in the books that he is the biggest Primarch by strength and size, and it's said that he is as tall as Horus in normal armor when Horus is in his like full-on Terminator plate. Whoa. So he is the biggest guy, and it is said he says he holds back in the kind of duels that they have, the kind of friendlies that they have between them in the kind of dueling pits, that he always holds back because he doesn't want to hurt them because he's like hench.
So he is pretty massive. I always thought that Magnus the Red was the biggest.
I think he might be taller, but I think some of that might be kind of warp presence as opposed to physicality.
His hair, he's got a good 3 foot of hair on him, to be fair.
Yeah.
He kind of grows up, and then this is his kind of, like you say, his heroic moment that a lot of these Primarchs have. Some don't, Kurz kind of scares everyone into oblivion, but this is a real heroism, walking out into the streets as the only person, and people get behind him. And as a result of this, the people of Nocturne put on a celebratory tournament, a kind of Olympic Games of Nocturne, big booze up. And some stranger appears at this tournament in fancy gear. Everyone's there in their kind of like dragon scale onesies, whatever they wear on Nocturne. And some guy appears in like a purple robe with loads of furs. And he walks straight up to Vulkan and he challenges him and says, I know you're the top dog around here, but if there's a tournament going on, it's me versus you, buddy. So they lay out a number of tournaments, a number of competitions between them, including things like anvil lifting, where Vulkan and the mysterious stranger have to hold a forge anvil above their head with their arms straight for as long as possible. This goes on for a day and a half before everyone gets bored and decides to move on to the next thing. There's a stinging nettle eating contest. There's some kind of gymnastics in the sauna. I don't know what the other
fucking episode of Jackass.
There's a load of competitions anyway. These things, they do 8 of the 9, and him and the stranger are tied. Everyone's like, whoa, who's this mysterious stranger? So the final thing that they have to do, the final challenge, is they both have 24 hours to forge a weapon and then go out and kill the biggest salamander on the planet. So we should note that Nocturne has salamanders on the planet, or dragons, essentially. Drakes, they're called, salamanders, dragons. They've got to forge a weapon and go out with only that weapon and bring back the biggest dead dragon that they can find, which is a pretty fucking cool contest.
Oh yeah, do you remember that? What's that program where they had to like make swords and it's like it will kill? Who was that guy? Forged in Fire. Do you remember that?
No, but that sounds excellent.
Oh yeah.
Is that's
like Is
that an American show?
It's an American show. It's like on like one of those. It's on one of those channels that's supposed to be educational. You know, it's like a History Channel or something. Now next up, Forged in Fire,
and they have to like
Kardashians.
Yeah, and they hit stuff with them, and then
there's this one guy who I don't know, he's like must be some kind of I assume professional assassin, because he does the "it will kill" test, where he like gets the sword and they like string up a pig. And he like smacks it a couple of times with the sword, and if the sword doesn't, like, you know, fucks up this thing, or gets one of those like see-through torsos with all like fake
ballistic test.
That's it. Yeah, and he goes, and if it will kill, he goes, "it will kill."
Amazing.
Anyway,
so yeah, that's what happens. There's an "it will kill" moment, and they go out and look to see if it will kill a dragon. And Vulkan, they go off in different directions. Vulkan finds this massive fire drake, slays it, thinks he's done well, slings it over his shoulder. He's like, I'm going to smash this stranger. And as he's walking back, the volcano he stood on erupts, right? It's fucking epic. He's got a dead fire dragon slung over his shoulder, and the volcano he's walking on erupts. And he ends up, Mufasa style, hanging one-armed from a cliff with the drake in the other arm and the fire below him. He's like, I could either pull myself up, but if I pull myself up, I've got to drop the dragon and I'll lose. The stranger's going to win. And what I hadn't mentioned is that what they've bet to each other is a servitude of infinity. So whoever loses this has to serve the other person forever. That's what's on the line. So he's hanging there. And the mysterious stranger comes by. And Vulkan can see that the mysterious stranger has an even bigger dead dragon slung over his shoulder, and the mysterious stranger throws the dragon aside into the lava to make a bridge to go and rescue Vulkan. And the two go back. The stranger's dragon's burning up. Vulkan's still got his dragon. They get back to the village. Vulkan wins. Everyone cheers Vulkan, but the stranger's basically saved his life. And Vulkan takes the knee to the stranger and says that he would kneel to any man that valued life over pride. And who does that stranger turn out to be, gentlemen?
Wally.
It's Wanda, actually. No, it's the Emperor. The fucking
Emperor.
Emperor.
Of course. Oh, damn. I should have seen it.
So I think this is really interesting, because we've done 4 Primarchs now. And a lot of the time we get to this point and we say, dick move, Emperor. Like real dick move. And you could say that this is a bit manipulative, but this isn't the same dick move that the Emperor pulls in a lot of places.
No.
I think this is another example, again, of almost this kind of like knowing, you know, like this almost like we're talking about like how all the Primarchs end up on a planet that they seem like amazingly suited for, almost like there's some kind of like secondary plan in place. And like this does feel almost like the Emperor always comes correct. You know, like he might be a dick, he might do something that we would think is wrong, but he always gets results. You can't argue with that, you know. And like, and he knew exactly how to come to Vulkan. Like, you know, this is completely the opposite from. Well, I mean, is it really that opposite from like when he went to see Angron and helped him do a bunch of fighting? I don't know. It's like he always comes correct. He always knows exactly what to do to get these guys on the side. Almost like there's some sort of pre-planning. Or at least a knowledge that these guys don't have.
And if he can't work out a way around it, he gets like Angron's a difficult one, because he gets Angron, but Angron doesn't like it, right? He gets him in a way that pisses Angron off, and does so for the whole rest of the heresy, but he gets him. And maybe that's because he realizes there's no other way to get Angron. Like, you're going to get him pissed off regardless.
It's his job to be pissed off,
exactly.
Right? I mean, in some ways, that's a part of his plan, right? His other plan, or at least if you're a Black Library writer, but maybe the Emperor as well.
But I think this moment also says a lot about Vulkan. That phrase that I would kneel to any man that values life over pride, and we'll see that in kind of the way the salamanders fight and things moving forward. That, you know, he's not Stalin wasting hundreds of millions of people. He does what he needs to do to get the job done and no more. So anyway, he's now kneeled to the Emperor. He's part of the Great Crusade. They start putting salamanders together, but not for a while, actually, because he spends quite a lot of time as kind of the Emperor's right-hand man, just the two of them kind of cruising together. which not all of the Primarchs get. Horus gets a bit of that, but some of them just kind of get united with their troops and off they go, whereas Vulkan gets to spend some time with Daddy.
And is that because he's found early on?
Yeah, he's on the earlier side.
Yeah, in terms of how the order in which the Emperor finds them. So maybe the Emperor's got more free time.
I also think if we're taking Vulkan's personality as this kind of nice guy this early on, I kind of think that Vulkan has a lot of personality traits that the Emperor likes to think are his main personality traits.
All right.
You know, like he's kind of like the mirror that the Emperor wants to see. He's a guy that does all of the things I feel like I hold most true.
Yeah.
Whereas some of his other sons are like looking in the mirror and seeing the worst version of yourself, I suppose.
Yeah,
he's maybe one of the most outward looking Primarchs, as in he wants to help other people almost even come into consideration with him, where a lot of other Primarchs it's just not even really a thought, for wider population.
And that absolutely becomes clear in like the first battles that he's involved with in the Great Crusade, because he ends up teamed up with Kurz. So Vulkan meets up with Kurz. I can't remember what the planet's called. It's called like 1544. It's just like 4 numbers or something. And he kind of gets there a bit late, and he wants to set out a kind of battle plan. How can he save as many of his soldiers as he can? How can they kill as few civilians as they can? What's the best way to bring this world to full compliance? And he kind of gets there, and Kurz appears from the shadows and says something along the lines of, hello, brother. I've actually brought the entire planet to compliance already. And Vulcan's like, what? And he's like, well, I just killed an entire city of civilians, and then everyone bowed the knee to me. And Vulcan loses his shit. They are like the two most opposite.
It was really bad planning teaming them up, to be fair. That was not that can't be in the Codex Astartes.
Well, that didn't exist at this point, but you're right. It certainly isn't now. But Vulcan is pissed that this is like the Night Lord's warfare, and this is what he's signed up to be part of this Imperium that treats human life to be expendable in this way. And they have like a massive argument where Kurz makes all the psychopathic points about like, well, your way would have ended up with 10 times as many people dead, so like my way is better. And Vulcan takes the moral stance of, but they were good people, etc., etc. They weren't in war. It's quite a good kind of fight and a good argument that they have, I think. You get to see both of their personalities in that. Talking about in that, the Black Library go-to man for any Vulcan stuff really is Nick Kime. He wrote the kind of Vulcan sequence of events in the Black Library, and they're really good if you want an idea of his personality. So anyway, he's kind of above all of this, but a bit later on, he actually kind of flies into a rage. He is not completely infallible in his morality, I guess a little bit like the Emperor. And one of the people that he's very close to, a remembrancer, gets killed, and he loses his shit and kills an Eldar child in a kind of fit of rage because he's just so fucking massive. So I think that's interesting as well, especially like if we're putting him to Guilliman and saying like, he's never pretended to be absolutely perfect, but he tries his best.
Well, I mean, yeah, and let's be real. He's a Primarch that was genetically engineered to lead a Space Marine Legion, killing many Xenos species. So he's a killing machine. I mean, he can be nice to his friends, but he's still killing loads of people.
At the end of the day, they all achieve their goals by killing people, isn't it? It's just
it's true.
He just feels like if you kill the right people, the killing will stop, which is kind of an irony in itself, I guess. But
that's exactly. You sound just like Kurz.
Oh god!
Yeah.
So, what is the kind of the flaw in the gene seed for the salamanders? Because
there isn't one.
Like so far, he sounds like, on paper, this is the perfect man, right? He's the perfect dude. He's like he's just the coolest guy in 40K. He just wants to help people out.
Well, I guess you could say that in itself, there doesn't seem to be a physical flaw other than the fact that they look a bit black and people aren't so into mutants at this period in time.
Yeah.
But you could say maybe that from, as you've just made, the point of being a general in war, being so obsessed with creating very little damage means that it takes you a long time to bring places to compliance. So if your aim as a general is to bring places under the thumb as quick as possible, maybe he's not your man. That could be seen as a negative, I suppose, from one perspective.
So in some ways that kind of the kindness of Vulkan is also his weakness.
Yeah, and potentially his environment as well.
Yeah,
as
I
we've
mean,
said,
it
Yeah.
sounds
his
like that.
loving
Yeah,
father,
yeah,
born of the blacksmiths, etc.
yeah.
Yeah.
Although that could be seen as his weakness, I'd say one of his strengths and would make him great at running a company if we're trying to sell him to Gilliman is his resilience. And I don't think you can find a more resilient man in both mind and body than Vulkan in the 30K setting. So he ends up on Istvan 5. The Istvan 5 massacre happens, and Perturabo fires a nuke at him and the salamanders. So the area of the battlefield that the salamanders and Vulkan land in is nuclear bombed from orbit by Perturabo, and he is like at the epicenter of the nuke.
Takes a nuke straight to the dome.
Takes a nuke to the dome, and this is where his real boon from the gene seed happens, right? Because it turns out he didn't realize this, but he is a perpetual. He is immortal.
So this is the first time he dies, effectively.
Yes, as far as I'm aware.
He gets nuked. I mean, it's one hell of a way to go.
Yeah. It's big time. Whether he is really, I mean, I've embellished it a bit there that he's at the epicenter and he's like frazzled. I think when you read it, it's probably not that case, but he's pretty close to the blast. He's not like eviscerated by it. But he certainly survives what everyone else around him is killed by. All of his legionaries around him are dead. It's one of the main reasons the salamanders are one of the smallest chapters. So many of them die on Istvan 5.
So is that how the perpetual thing works? Is your body still has to be kind of intact? Or like,
no,
I mean,
no.
The way perpetual works, and we'll see that in a second, that these perpetuals, there are differences, right? It gets a bit Dan Abnett-y that there are some that basically are like life perpetuals that live forever. But if they die, they die. So they just basically kind of get to adulthood and don't really age or age really slowly. And then there's ones that can be destroyed and come back, like they're kind of reborn. And Vulkan is one that's reborn, and it doesn't really matter what you do to his body. He is potentially going to come back as being nuked kind of frames, really. So he wakes up there on the battlefield. All the salamanders around him are dead. And he ends up fighting and fighting and fighting in like a fit of rage. And but eventually just the numbers overwhelm him. He gets knocked unconscious, and his old buddy Kurz is there to scrape him up off of the floor, lend him a helping hand, and throw him in prison on his ship. So Kurz basically kidnaps Vulkan. He fucking loves the idea of having someone he can kill over and over and over and over again. And this is the book Vulkan Lives by Nick Kime, and it's bloody brilliant. Kurz goes full saw, basically. He just puts Vulkan in a pit of traps. He, just to name but a few, cuts off his head, rips his throat out with a fork, tears all of his limbs out, blasts him into space, naked, into the void with no armor, puts him in a room full of heavy bolters and heavy bolters him to death, like blowing him into pieces, and he comes back every single time. Kurz cannot kill him. And this drives Kurz fucking insane.
More insane
than he already is. He doesn't like it.
So
he's
how
all
does
like,
he come back? Is that like mentioned?
No, Stoney, you're asking way too many questions.
Okay,
all you need to know, this is the trait he has from the Emperor, isn't it? Supposedly.
Yeah. But
does he just like show back up in the room after they've like chucked all his bits in the bin or something like that?
He think more like those sci-fis where all the various parts congeal and like rebuild into a like thing-esque.
Oh, T2000.
Handsome. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of described a bit like that, but I think Matt's right there as well. There's obviously some warp shit in play here, and it can't be perceived in any kind of real sense of reality.
Okay.
But when he's set on fire, he looks crispy and he slowly becomes more fleshy again. When he's cut into pieces, the pieces stick back together. That's the kind of way it's described.
Okay, all right.
So his body cannot be broken. So what does Kurz do? Well, he tries to break his mind. So what he does is he gathers up a load of Davenite priests and he takes him into to quote X-Men 97, which I'm fucking in love with at the moment, into like the astral plane, and makes him go through all of these horrible challenges where there's a load of innocent people and he has to choose between himself and the innocent people dying. And whatever he chooses, the innocent people always die. And Kurz is trying to make the point that Vulkan is just as much of a monster as he is. As we discussed earlier, like if your aim is to kill people, you are a military general, you are a monster. And he's trying to hammer this into Vulkan and keeps trying to break his mind. There's a bit where he convinces Vulkan that he's fighting Korax and he has to kill Korax in order to save a load of people. And then it turns out to all be in his mind. And it's really fucking traumatic. It's a great book. It's really, really dark. And the kind of last step to this is Kurz throws him in a labyrinth designed by Perturabo and duels him and hunts him from the shadows because Kurz knows where all the secret parts are. But in the center of the labyrinth is Vulkan's hammer. And he's like, if you can get to the hammer, you can fight me, blah, blah, blah. And stalks him round. And Vulkan finally manages to get to the hammer. And what Kurz doesn't know is he's got an inbuilt teleporter in the hammer. And that's how Vulkan manages to escape Kurz's grasp. He presses the teleport Homer, and the teleporter teleports him to the atmosphere of Macragge, where he turns into a meteor, sets fire, and plummets to the ground through re-entry into Macragge as a kind of burnt up, crispy shell of a Primarch. So that is resilience. That is dark shit. And I really do recommend that book. It's great.
I guess if you were the kindest guy in the 40K universe, you're in for a bad time, to be fair. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
There's no good guys to look forward to. And that is still the case when he heals from his burnt up crisp on Macragge. He has finally lost his mind. Kurz has broken him. That was the kind of final straw. He is in like an animal rage. He can't speak. He goes nuts. And through a real kind of wishy-washy Black Library twist of events, which we don't need to go into here because we did it in the Kurz episode, Kurz is also on Macragge. And when Vulkan wakes up, he can smell him. And this kind of feral Vulkan, half crispy, think Two-Face Primarch nude is running around trying to hunt down Kurz on Macragge. And they fight for ages. Like he catches him, they fight. This goes through, like they smashing through buildings. There's one point where he flips a Land Raider with his hand, like picks up a Land Raider and like hurls it. This dude's fucking huge. But he can't get a grasp on Kurz. So whilst this fight's going on, we get a cameo from John Grammaticus, Dan Abnett's favorite perpetual. So John Grammaticus is also a perpetual, but he's a kind of weird perpetual that's been imbued with the power of perpetuality by the Cabal, which is the like shady Alpha Legion people that work with the Eldar.
The sort of weird alien gang.
Yeah, the Bilderberg group. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Working in the background. John Grammaticus appears because the Cabal have convinced him to kill Vulkan. So they've provided him with what's called a fulgurite spear, which is a weapon that is able to kill a perpetual. So what they've told him to do is they've told him to give this spear to Kurz so that Kurz can kill Vulkan permanently. And John Grammaticus is kind of questioning the Cabal at this point, thinking, like, whose side am I fucking on? I thought, clearly out of this fight, even though he looks like a feral monster, Vulkan is the good guy. Like, Kurz is not the good guy. He's greasy and he's covered in blood. Like, he's not the fucking good guy.
Yeah.
He's wearing skin, for Christ's sake. So he's starting to question it. And then we get another cameo by none other than Eldred. So Eldred Uthwan appears to John Grammaticus and tells him that what he needs to do is stab Vulkan with the fulgurite spear, but he needs to do it himself. Because if one perpetual stabs another, what will happen is that John Grammaticus will lose the ability to be a perpetual, but he will restore Vulkan to full health and all of his memory. Because Eldrad knows that if Vulkan is to die, then the scales will be tipped entirely in the favor of chaos, and Vulkan needs to live. So he convinces John Grammaticus to kill Vulkan himself, and John Grammaticus does. He stabs Vulkan in the heart with this spear. He loses his perpetuality, but Vulkan doesn't come back to life. It looks like he just dies. And his brothers are there now. Gilliman's there, Lionel's there, Sanguinis is there. They scoop him up, they put him in a stasis chamber, and they send him back to Nocturne. So this is really interesting, like Cabal, big state of the place, Alpha Legion, Eldar fuckery that will have big impact going forward. Essentially, Eldrad has saved a Primarch, whereas the Cabal and at least part of the Alpha Legion were trying to take him out, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of sucks to be Vulcan, where even if someone's being nice to you, it means they've got to stab you in the heart with a special spear.
Yeah.
You're right.
Nice
he doesn't have an
guys.
easy time of it. Nice guys finish with a blade in their heart for sure. And all of that happens in Unremembered Empire, which is a Dan Abnett book, which is why it brings all of these characters back together. It's a real focal point in the Black Library. So
yeah.
He ends up back on Nocturne. Some shit happens there, and he does get revived eventually. It just takes ages. So he wakes up underneath the volcano in like some magma chamber on Nocturne, next to a talisman of 7 hammers, which is this talisman, and there's also a hammer there, which he can tell that he's made, but he can't really remember doing it. He's just got these 2 like special artifacts next to him, and he plays around, fiddles around with the talisman of the 7 hammers, and it opens up a webway portal below Nocturne. And this is all kind of covered in another one of the Nick Kine books, Old Death. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's a massive journey, but essentially he wanders through the webway. He fights some Dark Eldar. He meets this cult called the Cult of Gorgon, which have made like a puppet version of Ferrus Manus. It's like a bionic version of Ferrus Manus attached to one of his like arms, and they're trying to like put him back together. He doesn't like that. He smashes them to pieces. And then eventually he battles a great unclean one. He kills a great unclean one in 1-to-1 combat, which is pretty badass. And then Eldrad shows up again, and finally Eldrad guides him to the Imperial Palace. So he tries to get to the webway portal that's under the throne room, but that's all been sealed off because there's loads of fighting been going on in there. And Eldrad makes a portal appear outside the Imperial Palace, and he just kind of turns up. And Dawn's like, I want to question this because it seems real dodgy, but I'm kind of glad my brother's here, so I'll take you straight on inside to the throne room.
Yeah, very true.
So again, wouldn't happen without kind of Eldrad's involvement that he can get there.
I think he's got to be due an episode, doesn't he? I mean, that boy's done a shitload of stuff.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
He's got his finger in all the pies and could even be a member of the Cabal, according to some accounts. So fuck knows what his game is. When he gets to the throne room, the Emperor reveals to Vulkan, and this comes back to your question earlier, Stoney. He straight up says to Vulkan that the purpose of his creation was to be able to construct the talisman, because the talisman isn't just the ability to travel in the webway, which obviously the Emperor's been planning for fucking years. It's his big secret, but it's also the self-destruct button for Terra. And if all goes tits up, Vulkan is the man he wants in charge of the self-destruct button for Terra. So that's a fucking huge responsibility for the Primarch.
And the Emperor tells him that he wants it to be him, Vulkan, and not the others, because he is the only Primarch that the Emperor knows will not make that decision lightly.
Yeah, describes it as he's the only one who's hesitant to use the weapons he's forged,
and therefore he won't jump to the button. He's gonna, and Vulkan made it when he was sort of healing, but he didn't know what he was making, and he didn't know why he was making it. So the Emperor's like made him make this thing without him knowing what it was for, and then he's turned up on Terra, and it's like,
real important.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah. And he plugs it into the Golden Throne.
There's so little that shows that this whole, to argue that the whole thing, including the war and the siege and everything, is part of the Emperor's plan. But if the Emperor didn't foresee this happening, then he wouldn't have made Vulkan able to do that.
No.
Unless it's a backup plan.
A
He
backup
must see
plan,
all
yeah.
features, but that's I
Yeah.
think that's cool in itself.
Maybe he's more like a snake than an eagle.
There's definitely there's definitely there's
Some
definitely a
snakiness
side to
about
that.
him.
Yeah. But that if we put the snake side away, the fact that the Emperor has created him for that reason, and the fact that the Emperor entrusts him for that reason, and not to press the button, not to be the bad guy, take his time in deciding when the decision needs to be made. He's being relied upon to make that decision. That, for a fair trade organization, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's
you're right.
that's
He's
pretty
putting
good,
everyone
pretty good
else before
trait.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. For sure, absolutely. So he's there at this point. I should say the Emperor has already kind of confined himself to the throne for now, and Vulkan kind of stays in the throne room, standing sentinel until our favorite boy in red blasts into the throne room. So Magnus appears in the throne room. This all happens in the fury of Magnus. We talked about this last year when I read the book and it came out, and we got some more info on was Magnus good or bad. You can listen to our episode on Magnus. But he turns up, appears from nowhere, and tries to kill the Emperor, and Vulkan blocks that blow from Magnus. And it's at that point where the Emperor offers Magnus the final deal. And the final deal is, you can rejoin me. I will let you off for all the webway shit, but I need to cleanse your entire legion. I need to kill your legion, but you will be okay. And Magnus tells the Emperor to get fucked and runs away into the webway. And the kind of whole plot of that book, The Fury of Magnus, is Vulkan goes into the webway after Magnus. It does a lot of wandering around the webway. He fights Magnus over and over again. Magnus kills him a shitload of times, but over the kind of warped infinity time of the fucking webway, Vulkan kind of wears Magnus down in a war of attrition and finally smashes his skull in and banishes Magnus into the warp, and then spends ages wandering back, manages to find his way back to the throne room. And as soon as he arrives, Daddy's not like, great job, thanks for banishing Magnus to the warp, that was really useful. Daddy's like, right, I'm fucking off now to the vengeful spirit. See you later. My old man Malkador here, he's going to take the seat. Can you just babysit him for a bit? Vulkan's like, I want to come fight Horus. But he knows it's not the right thing to do. So he stands vigil over Malkador, riding the golden throne. And what you were saying, Matt, why he's picked and why it's so important at the end of the Siege of Terror is that there's a very clear moment where the most people would have pressed that button. And just as he's about to press it, he really feels like he's waited as long as he possibly can. The voice of Acte comes, the choir sings, the Astronomicon turns back on, and he takes his finger away from the button that would have exploded Terror. So he is like the reason Terror exists. And until I did this research, kind of I've read a lot of these books over time, but weaving this story together, you might think he's a kind of sidebar Primarch when you look at the 20, but actually he's been built so much into the story now that he's really central to everything happening.
I've never really thought of him as a side character, because I feel like we always kind of talk about him a little bit when we do any other Primarch stuff, as particularly the Kurz one. Obviously, I feel like we've talked about him a couple of times, but I always feel like some Primarchs are Primarchs that do things, and some Primarchs are Primarchs that have things happen to them. And Vulkan is very much a Primarch that has stuff happen to him, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't think that makes him like a side character.
Well,
I think I know.
What I'm saying is
I think I know what you mean.
Because
the
salamanders aren't big in the lore, so you don't think about them as much, I suppose. They're not poster boys of 40K.
I guess they're important for getting blown up. That's the kind of thing that they're like famous for.
The salamanders are, in terms of real world, like how much visual impact they have in terms of the real world. They're lesser than people like the Black Templars, the Crimson Fists that we spoke about last episode. Like they're just not really. They're the same sort of thing with the White Scars, even though they're one of the original legions. They just don't have a presence like Imperial Fists,
Yeah, I guess
the
that's true.
Blood Angels.
Yeah, I think so. That's probably true. Yeah, I guess they are probably on
There's
about
a reason.
White Scar's level of fame.
As we know, the legions were created before the Primarchs were found by the Emperor from the Primarchs' original gene seeds. And the Salamanders were no different, and they were known not as the Salamanders, but they were known as the Dragon Warriors. So this would have been the time when the recruits were all or mostly from Terra. So it's the beginning of the Legiones Astartes and the unification wars on Terra, pre-Great Crusade. And we've spoken about the gene seed, actually. I've got a note here, which is that they, for some reason, their reflexes are slower than most Space Marines. So this was apparent straight away when they were created. And there's no real reason for that. For the most part, it says that when they wear their power armor, that it doesn't really matter. You can't really tell the difference, but they're a bit slower than a normal Space Marine, still quicker than a human. So it's not really a big deal. Maybe they're just big and slow. I don't know.
That's interesting. I guess that comes into play with the way they fight, which
yes. Yeah. So they, because we as we mentioned, he's one of the earliest Primarchs found. I don't know if there's a link to this, but they're also one of the earliest legions that are sort of created. And along with the Space Wolves and the Alpha Legion, they're known as the Proto Legions. So they're quite early on in the Emperor's building of the Legiones Astartes, and they have, as we've been discussing, a reputation now in the 40K setting and even somewhat in the 30K setting of being the nice guys. Certainly with Vulkan, but at the beginning of the Great Crusade and the Unification Wars, prior to meeting Vulkan, they were actually kind of they weren't the good guys at all. They had a reputation of being far more bloody, and really they didn't really care for the human population like they do in their latter future. And there's one particular battle at the end of the Unification Wars where 20,000 salamanders deploy and something like 1,000 survive. They just go full in. They quite like fighting in close quarters, which I'll explain why. But they suffer horrendous casualties. And basically the Legion, even when they meet Vulkan, never rebuilds from that moment.
Wow.
And they become a very small legion because of it, and they're split up. So as they try to rebuild their numbers, they don't have enough of them to fight as a legion does. Like, say, the Ultramarines would deploy in a huge amount of numbers to take a planet. They can't really do that. So they sort of split up as more and more chapters are rebuilt of the Legion, and they're sent around the galaxy. They'll be protecting areas of space more behind the lines, and they'll be called in to fight sudden threats, things like space hulks. So if the space hulk appears in Imperial space, they'll be called upon to land on it and take it out. So small, close quarters, typically fighting where there's no need for a duration, so no wars of attrition, and they don't necessarily have to be quick. So they don't have to be speedy or agile, which is good because they have slower reflexes for some reason. But they're kind of like a plaster.
Do they like enjoy fighting? Because you really get the sense
Well,
from some Space Marines that that's what they're all about.
I from what I've read of the original Legion, yeah, because that example of the battle,
guys, yeah,
the 20,000 basically ran headlong into this battle, and they didn't care about the casualty rate. They just wanted to win. That's what they cared about, and they.
It's interesting that because we see that with a lot of the legions, don't you? That they're basically shit before the Primarch arrives.
Yeah, that's
same with
true.
The Blood Angels, they're going fucking nuts, eating brains before Sanguinius tells them to calm it down. Which kind of is an argument, I suppose, against that idea that the Emperor knew the Primarchs were going to be scattered, because it seems like a bit of a waste to make all the
Okay.
Space Marines. If you,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you,
because you make them shit. But they're better with the
they're better with the
Primarchs.
Primarch. Yeah.
Yeah, they're sort of built and based like the other legions, but they're a bit different because there's so few of them, and they tend to operate more in company formations because there's so few of them. But because they're fighting, like I said, on things like Space Hulks, or they're just deployed to stop a threat that's attacking the Imperium rather than them necessarily attacking an enemy, they're fighting in closer range. So they have a tendency to prefer weapons like flame weapons, Volkite ray weapons, melter weapons. But they also have a natural technical aptitude, and it was found that if they were in situations where they would need to field manufacture weapons, so a different design of flamer, for example, that they could do that, and they could operate where they might have uncertain supply of weapons. They could actually solve the supply issues themselves by manufacturing and designing solutions to their supply problems. So they were quite an independent force, and they tended, because they were fighting more behind the lines and they weren't in a big legion formation of Marines, they fought alongside a lot of human formations, which is potentially where they start to have more of a connection to the human population of the Imperium. They tended to fight small units of Space Marines alongside human cohorts that were fighting alongside them. So they start to have more of an attachment to humans than other legions. And when Vulkan returns to his legion, one of the things that he tries to do is unify it more into a legion formation. So rather than deploying it all piecemeal, but he wants to keep that spirit of self-sufficiency and independence of command. He doesn't want to remove that from them. He likes the fact that they can design themselves out of a problem and manufacture solutions, and be it a weapon system or tactically invent new tactics to get out of a situation that they're stuck in. And he splits up the Legion into realms, which are linked to the seven. So the 7 realms in the Legion, and they're linked to the 7 great cities on Nocturne. So they're basically like they become like the companies of the Legion, known as the realms, and they are linked to the cities. The Lord Commander of each of the realms becomes the protector of the city, and that sort of creates quite a strong link with each of the companies to the cities on Nocturne. And
Do
over
they
time,
only recruit from Nocturne from now on, or are they recruiting from everywhere? Did you see?
no, they after. So as I say, at the beginning, it's Terra because that's where the Legion is. Then when Vulkan appears, they tend to then prefer to use the people from Nocturne because they are very resilient. So it's that resiliency that we've spoken about, very strong, and they have the blacksmith ability mixed with the gene seed from Vulkan makes them very good artisans. So he slow over some time, they tend to swing towards wanting their recruits from Nocturne, not from Terra. But when Vulkan, because we mentioned that Vulkan had some time with the Emperor, a bit like Horus did. And I think it's actually a few decades, it's like 40 years he spends with the Emperor, and the Legion don't know that he's been found. So, and he knows that the Legion are out there, but he sort of is biding his time. He's learning from the Emperor, and then eventually the Salamanders, which aren't known as Salamanders at that time, they're known as the Dragon Warriors. They get themselves into a bit of a situation where, again, they've almost fought too hard. They've sacrificed too many of their men. They've got themselves stuck on a planet. I think they're fighting orcs in a star system. but they've sacrificed. So they're fighting like the Death Guard, but they're doing it. They are doing it so that they've saved 3 human worlds that have had the time to evacuate. But they
they're
are
slowing everything down and taking a lot of losses so that people can escape.
Yeah, but they are still fighting like the Death Guard, and there was something I read where the Imperial Council, or the people in command of deploying legions, they see the Dragon Warriors as akin to the Death Guard. That's sort of the crazy level of running at the enemy that the Dragon Warriors are. But then maybe they're doing it for slightly different reasons, because they are still trying to save people. So they have that element with them before Vulkan arrives to a degree. But they've got themselves into a right situation, and that's when Vulkan decides that he's going to join the Legion to try and help them. And he arrives on this planet with 3,000 new legionaries who are recruits from Nocturne, as well as a new fleet. He arrives, he smashes all the orcs, and there's a moment where the Terran-born Space Marines from the Dragon Warriors meet what will be known as the Salamanders from Nocturne. They sort of unhelm, and there's like an immediate kinship between them. They all start kneeling before Vulkan, and Vulkan says that he should kneel before them, the whole Legion. I've seen the sacrifice you've made, and I've seen what you've done to try to save those worlds, and a bit like what you did with the Emperor, actually. And he kneels before the Legion, and he says, like, you know, we're all together now, and we're gonna go out and save humans to a degree. That's what he says. And then he renames the Dragon Warriors Salamanders, and that's the link that Welsh you mentioned with the apex predator of Nocturne. And that's when
I do feel like if you were one of the Dragon Warriors, I do feel like it's a little bit of a downgrade to be known as the Salamanders.
You've gone from people fighting the dragons to being the dragons.
I hadn't thought about that. You're the apex predator being hunted. So he does various changes, like I said, with the links to Nocturne, and they grow over time, but it's still a really small legion because of the fact that they lost so many, and this would have been, I don't know, like 100, 200 years earlier, when they lost all those men in the Unification Wars, that it's still a really small legion. And for the most part, they still don't really deploy at full legion strength on their own. They're always with other legions, which is why partly that they're on Istvan with other legions, because they can't do something like that on their own. You know, like the Space Wolves, they were powerful enough to attack Magnus on his own. They couldn't do anything like that. And they carried on this weird way of fighting that they sort of developed because there were so few of them. So it's called asymmetrical warfare. Don't really know what that means, but it basically means that it fits in with the fact that they all have flamers and short-ranged weapons.
It's fire. Lots of fire.
But they don't, so it's weird because they don't have like fast attack necessarily. So you don't really see bikers, and you don't get what they call the void skimmers, the land speeders and stuff like that. It's not like fast like the White Scars. They're not slow like, or defensive like the Imperial Fist. It's like a weird in between, but they like to get up close and personal. So they have,
like say, like the Death Guard, they're just like trudging.
They have really good Terminators, and they have that because there's this whole artisan side to the Legion. So because of the smithing, and they have an innate ability to create, that a lot of their Terminator armor is like peak performance. They're really good Terminator armor.
It's the Gucci of 40K armor.
Yeah, and they're the Terminators. Well, in the Legion, their first company, so the main city-state company, they're known as the Firebrands, and they are still around in 40K. In 40K, they're the first the first company. So they're the ones that still wear the Terminator armor. So they have they're kind of well known for how good their Terminators are.
Cool
And
models
that's
as
to do with
well
their armor.
in the real world. Like
yeah.
The kind of, we talked about those like add-on kits and stuff before, but the Drake capes and the extra bits of flames and stuff that you get, and the artificer like bespoke kind of armor elements that they have are really cool. I've just pulled up. Knew there was a quote, because the way that they're developing weapons, like you say, they can do it on the hoof, but they do it in quite a pretty way. They're quite, like you say, artisan, bespoke stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas like Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands, they're just making stuff that's useful. Same as Perturabo, I suppose.
Yeah.
But there's a quote from Vulkan to Ferrus Manus where he says, "The flesh is weak, but deeds endure." So I think even that like artificerness it's a hobby and not a way of life. Like their way of life is deeds and heroism and being good to people, but they can also, they're just great at making shit.
Yeah. I've written a note here that says Vulcan admired Ferrus Manus as a fellow creator, but was slightly unsettled by the way he created weapons without forges and fire. And I think when I wrote that earlier, it has slightly different meaning, because we've been talking about his upbringing. Yeah, it's not to do with the forges and the fire necessarily, but it's more to do with the artisanal aspect. When you're working with a forge,
I haven't got magic Necron eyes that are like building shit by themselves. I've done it with a hammer.
Yeah, it's not necessarily literally the way Ferrus Manus makes stuff, or the Iron Hands make stuff. It's the fact that they're.
Well, I mean, I think that the difference is
so cold.
That, Vulcan, he's making tools, whereas Ferrus Manus, I mean, he kind of sees himself as being half metal anyway, doesn't he? These aren't weapons to use. These are kind of, he literally, like, it must be unnerving watching Ferrus Manus in the workshop just pick up a piece of iron and bend it into a sword with his bare hands. That shit's got to be weird as fuck.
Yeah, but if we go back to the Legion, so 30K, so just before the drop site massacre, as I say, they're very small, but they have a high proportion of special weapon units, flamer squads, including they have a proto-classed elite, which carried prototype and highly adaptable flamer projector weapons, which sound quite cool, and they maintained and manufactured a substantial armory of heavy vehicles and war engines, which actually equal the number and diversity of a much larger Legion. So they kind of have a really fancy, pimped up garage. They have all of the Thunderbird 2 compartments ready to go. They're souped up.
There's no one to drive them.
yeah. And the war fleet that they had was the same. It was like every warship was a piece of art. Very, very powerful, better than comparable sized ships, but they just didn't have that many of them. And I mentioned the comparison that the Imperial High Command had with the Death Guard, and that actually led to the Death Guard and the Salamanders not being deployed together, because they saw them as fulfilling very similar roles, and that started a bit of tension between the two legions and the Primarchs, which continues.
They're both green.
Yeah.
Not at this point, but they will be in the future.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Also, Nurgle must hate a guy that can't decay.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And
it's like he's green, but he can't decay. I don't know what to think.
Yeah. And he has. So I mentioned the first company, what will become the chapter's first company, being they're the Fire Drakes, not the Firebrands, the Fire Drakes, which is also a dragon connection. And he has his Pyre Guard, which are his personal honor guard. Now, we mentioned what happened to him on Istvan when he gets nuked on the head. So much of the Legion was destroyed. I mean, there's, I don't know, like a few hundred maybe that survived that aren't on Istvan. I'm not sure. After the Horus Heresy, there's basically nothing that can be worked on them. So unlike other legions that are forced to break into chapters, the Vulcan and Guilliman come to a bit of an agreement where essentially the the salamanders aren't split up, so they're
He hates the
retained.
Codex Astartes, doesn't he? Because he's
Yeah.
like, you can't split up my. I don't have enough.
I don't have enough. Yeah. So they just say, and as far as the lore goes, and there are stuff that's rumored, but they don't actually have any follow-on chapters based from their gene seed. That they're just the salamanders are as far as Vulkan's gene seed lineage goes. So unlike the last episode we mentioned, Black Templars and the Crimson Fists, just as the beginning of where the Imperial Fists move into other chapters. But they're
What's also quite interesting is normally when we do these Primarch episodes, we end up talking about the second in command or some other member of the Legion.
right.
And I don't think I can't think of any like the first captain of salamanders or whatever.
I mean, I guess that's what happens when your army gets nuked at the beginning of the book. But
yeah, there's one salamander like other character in 30K that's in like there's like a band of brothers thing with like one from each legion that managed to survive Istvan.
Oh yeah,
that plays a little bit.
What's his name? Do you remember his name?
I can't remember which one it is, but he's with there's a group of them and they go and fight the Sons of the Selenar. They end up being called, and they get like a book by themselves. I think there's one in there, and some of his mates get killed, and that makes him freak out. And then you have that confusing thing in 40K where you have Vulkan Stan, which is like their main character, but he's not Vulkan. It's just a guy named after him.
Yeah. So
Stan's Vulkan. Vulkan Stan.
I'll get onto that. So they don't really have any follow-on chapters, so it's weird. So in a way, the Space Marine chapter that exists in 40K is really still the Space Marine Legion. There's no they roughly follow the Codex Astartes. And I'd forgotten about this, but I think we mentioned it in one of the religion episodes we did. But there becomes a growing cult on Nocturne called the Promethean cult. And I'm sure we've spoken about this before, which is an accepted variant of the Imperial cult, which places a high regard on self-reliance, self-sacrifice, and loyalty to each other as well as to the Emperor. So that resilience that we mentioned in 30K has sort of manifested itself more as a pseudo-religious aspect.
There's one of the Christian religions is like that, isn't it? It's like put each other above the religion itself. I can't remember which one it is.
Maybe.
Was that the Quakers or something?
The Quakers. That's
okay.
Yeah,
so the Quakers are 40K. Yeah. And they're still so the chapter in 40K, there's still widespread use of flamers, melt guns. I mean, really, they're not that different to their Legion.
Yeah, man.
And Quakers. And the Quakers before them.
Yeah. They start selling oats, they're growing oats, boxing them up.
So in 40K, the salamanders all have, it's almost like, well, it is basically compulsory blacksmith training. So they're all trained in the skills of the blacksmith on Nocturne, and they're all fully capable of maintaining and performing moderate repair work on their weapons and armor. So they're artisans, the chapter's artificers and tech marines, etc. They have more free time to create great works, and they have more free time to roam around the galaxy, finding some special technology that Vulkan has left for them, which is an interesting aspect of where he disappears, which I guess we'll get onto. But they have a high number of mastercrafted weapons and artificial armor.
That's always been reflected in the rules as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
well, it used to be when chapters had codices, but
because they had a book, didn't they?
Yeah, and they had re-rolls to hit and that kind of thing, and a lot of their enhancements were all about like better weapon skill and all that kind of malarkey. Yeah. And
they
cut flamer boosts as well.
Oh yeah, I remember the flamer boosts. Weapons. Yeah, they before every battle they cut themselves. Promethean brander priests, they all get branded, and it symbolizes their respect for the chapter and the Promethean belief that one must be cleansed by the pain of fire. I think isn't Prometheus the moon of Nocturne? There's some
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, there's some cool shit in there, isn't there? That
Yeah.
we've got Vulkan, that is the god of the forge and volcanoes in Roman mythology.
Yeah.
You've got Prometheus, who is literally the person that makes people. I think in Greek mythology, Zeus's mate that like actually builds humans. I think. So there's loads of reference to that old school shit.
And it's not known in 40K whether the Pyre Guard, which was the guard of Vulkan, is still around. So because Vulkan is also potentially still around, it's quite possible that they retain a number, or you can get promoted into the bodyguard for the missing Primarch, ready for his return. Which is quite interesting.
That's going to be the easiest job ever, to be a bodyguard for someone that's missing. I want that promotion.
I'm sure you have to do other stuff, but yeah.
It's just making things. Just sit around making hammers, waiting for the daddy to come home. Fucking mate.
And you can also get promoted into being what's known as a Forge Father. So these are the people who travel the galaxy seeking out the lost artifacts of Vulkan and trying to get information on the fate of him back to Nocturne. So they kind of
bit of like
go around
fantasy dwarf stuff.
Yes.
Kind of mixed
yeah.
Here, right? Like,
right.
Maybe they are space dwarfs.
He's the biggest one.
Oh, you heard it here first.
He's the reverse.
There is definitely, with the fantasy dwarfs and the Lord of the Rings dwarfs with the hammers and I can see that. And the Forge Fathers are the guys who, when they become a Forge Father, they take on the name of Vulkan, which is what you were saying, Welsh. Where loads of them
Vulkan he stand.
Yeah, and the chapter masters are all called Vulkan. And that's weird. That's a bit like the Alpha Legion. That's like, and you also become one of the lords of the chapter, and you get a seat on what's known as the Parthenon Council. It's an 18-person chapter council, so they're not in command of the chapter, but they're sort of they're in the leadership role of the chapter, but they still have a chapter master, like all other chapters. And these, we've mentioned the craft that they do, and that's really a trait of Vulkan as well. So I looked into stuff that he had made personally, because he is a smithy, and it's been written that he's forged thousands of unique and dangerous artifacts in his lifetime. And he eventually, prior to Istvan, he charged the first Forge Father, a guy called Tkel, with destroying all of those artifacts that he made as he departed for Istvan 5. So I don't know whether... I haven't read that book, so I don't know whether that's because he knew what was happening or he was worried about what might happen with the creations that he'd made.
He has an inkling because
okay.
When he sees all the curse shit go down, he basically tells on him. He goes and tells Horus and is like, "Look, something's
Horus
not right.
just laughs at him.
Something not right,
like...
buddy." And Horus doesn't react in the way that Horus of old would have done, and he has this inkling that something's up, but he doesn't know what it is.
So again, I mean, that's quite cool of his personality, where he tries to sort of he got his house in order before knowingly going to a very dangerous situation. If he had a hunch, he got his that's quite cool.
Not a great trait, if you're operating your fair trade in a dodgy environment.
Yeah,
you got to
stick to your morals.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he was equipped with many finely crafted weapons that he'd built himself, and some of them were saved from the thousands that he'd made. And Tekel, the first Forge Father, he was tasked with keeping some. I don't know whether it was stipulated exactly that he kept, I can't remember if it's 7 or 9. But he destroys all of the others, and the rest become scattered around the galaxy. Vulkan, after the Horus Heresy, scatters these artifacts around the galaxy, and they are known as the artifacts of Vulkan.
Another original naming technique there from the salamanders.
Yeah. But before he does that, he had some quite interesting war gear. So this is essentially what he goes to Isvan 5 with. He has a massive Thunderhammer, Dawnbringer, which he originally built for Horus. He was a gift for Horus when he became the War Master on his promotion. So this, if you remember, is the thing that had the teleporter in.
Yeah.
Because he didn't give it to Horus because he had that funny feeling when he met Horus. He decided not to give it to him, and he takes it to Isvan 5 because he feels like not like a point of revenge, but it's like a point of, if his worst fears are true, he's made this for him as a gift, and he's kept it for himself, and he's gonna win. He's gonna win with the weapon that he made to give to the War Master.
Yeah,
he's gonna beat the War Master with it. And he's also armed with a plasma pistol called the Furnace's Heart. And he's wearing his Baroque power armor known as the Draken Scale, which included the Gauntlet of the Forge, which is essentially
sweet left golden arm.
Yeah, it's a power fist with a built-in heavy flamer. And the Thunderhammer Dawnbringer, the one he built for Horus, it either gets something happens, it doesn't survive Istvan, but he continues to build Thunderhammers after the Horus Heresy. He has like his hobby is essentially designing and building Thunderhammers.
Yeah, he loves it.
Yeah, he makes that Thunderhammer because Horus is his favorite brother before the Horus Heresy.
I think it's quite sad, that bit in the books where he goes and like he's spent ages making it, and he turns up and he's like, so like my brother's doing this weird thing, bro, like best bro, and I've made you this oh wait, you're looking a bit bloodshot around the eyes. Your shadow's
Suspect.
not in the right place.
Yeah.
I haven't made you something.
Is that a tentacle coming out your armor there? Like, yeah.
But that also shows an interesting side of his personality, where other Primarchs would have reacted to that situation differently. I mean, some of them joined Horus. He didn't.
He's a very like thoughtful Primarch, isn't he? You know, it's kind of interesting that he was like in a way, why wasn't he picked for the Horus role? You know, I mean, I guess that like I mean
that would have been
yeah.
Maybe because he's not that good as a general.
Is he? Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
like compared to Horus, like Horus is like getting places under compliance left, right, and center. You know.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. He thinks a lot more. Like,
and I mean, the
Fulgrim in that scenario wouldn't have been able to
obviously-
leave without someone saying that's a great hammer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Emperor obviously. I mean, so a lot of the time when we talk about Primarchs, like when we do the Angeron one and stuff, they're just big babies, really, aren't they? They're just these kind of like, you know, they're not really ready for the power that they have. Where it seems more like Vulcan is, you know, like just more ready for it.
Yeah. No, it's kind of a weird bit because I just wanted to touch on the artifacts of Vulcan, but for me, really, to go into that, we have to start talking about how he disappears.
So yeah, I don't want to go too much detail on this because we've done loads on the history, but at the end of the siege, he does what his brother Leman Russ does and says kind of, fuck you guys, I'll see you at the end times, and disappears. And the end times turn out not to be right now. They turn out to be about 1,500 years later. Yeah, 1,500 years later in the War of the Beast.
So I didn't check if this was true, but I listened to a YouTube video where this guy suggested. So you mentioned, Welshie, that he killed an Eldar child.
Yeah,
and he felt really bad for it.
Yeah,
and this guy claimed on YouTube that,
like we are,
that he potentially went back to that planet that's where he went for 1500 years to help to protect that planet, basically.
Potentially. There's some planets around it. I think may have been called Caldera or something.
No, that rings a
he
bell.
swears this allegiance to a planet called Caldera. There's another bit
everyone's always happy to see the guy that killed that kid that one time show back up.
Yeah.
But there's another bit that makes me feel really bad. And this turns out to all be the Emperor sets these things in motion to teach him a lesson, which I didn't go into in his history. But there's a bit where he basically goes to kind of free a prehistoric human civilization on a planet that live in kind of as cavemen under the thrall of the Exodite Eldar. And they go in and they clear out the Exodite Eldar, and the humans don't bow to him. And the Emperor sends them on this kind of list of this kind of journey through the planet, and he finds a load of these prehistoric kind of caveman-esque humans sacrificing a female Dark Eldar child at a webway gate. And it turns out that the Exodites had been protecting / enslaving the humans, but protecting them from Dark Eldar, who came to the planet and kidnapped them and raped them and did loads of horrible stuff. And now the humans think the only way to stop that happening is to make sacrifices at the webway portal. And the Emperor has led Vulkan there to teach him the lesson that these humans are never going to kneel. And Vulkan has to kill them. He has to cleanse the entire planet because they won't be subdued. So the Emperor is trying to teach this lesson of not everybody can be saved, which again is quite dark. So I think some of that is potentially wrapped up in where he might have been for that 1500 years, making amends, going on a gap year to build schools and toilets and stuff.
Why don't they just let him defend people? Why have they got to keep taking him off to places and keep trying to make a curse out of him? He was doing fine.
but he does, because as we say, he thinks he's going to be gone for a lot longer, but it's only 1500 years, because then this giant orc appears.
Yeah, because there's this giant orc called the Beast, and there's this huge orc, and part of it's a literary device to have a major player in the War of the Beast series, I'm sure, but they go and get him. He comes back to help. But as you were saying earlier, Matt, he basically only cares about building Warhammers at this point, just like us. He only cares about building Warhammers. So this Inquisitor picks him up and puts him on his ship, takes him to a planet, and he kind of single-handedly defends this planet for ages. In fact, I think he might be single-handedly defending a planet from the Orcs before the Inquisition turn up. And they hear about this dude that's defending an entire planet by himself. And then they realize, oh, that's quite a big dude. Oh, shit, that's probably Vulkan, this fella we've heard about in storybooks. And anyway, they put him on the ship, and they're like, right, we've got to go to Ulanor, because the Orcs have built a city in Ulanor, and they've renamed Ulanor. You'll like this, Matt. Gorkogrod.
Yeah, great.
They've renamed Ulanor Gorkogrod. But all the whole while he's there, he's not really interested in being involved in any of the plans or anything. He's just literally like fiddling with his Warhammer in his chambers. He doesn't come out. He doesn't talk to anyone. He's just building this. I think it's called Doombringer or something fucking cool like that. Anyway, they get to Ulanor. That's where the Beast is. And then Vulkan, they're all a bit worried that Vulkan's not really going to do anything. Like maybe he's a bit past it. And then he just like jumps out of the ship and fucks shit up. Gets into where the Beast is in what's called a temple gargan. So the Beast is like Gazgul on steroids. This 10-meter tall war boss. This huge fucking war boss. And their fight ends with them smashing into something called a war core, which is this core of like green war energy. And Vulkan smashes into it. And he somehow manages to use his perpetualness and fucking primarch body to absorb the war energy and powers it all into this hammer. Again, maybe he knew that he needed to make this special hammer to suck up this war energy. And he smashes the war boss's skull in with this energy. And the whole temple gargan explodes, like massive megaton explosion. And that's the last we see of him. He's presumed dead from that point, 1500 years after the Horus heresy. So since then the salamanders have been hunting for the artifacts in the hope it brings him back.
Yeah, because he left these 9 artifacts dotted around the galaxy and basically said, when you find them all, I'll reappear because you'll happen to find them all just at the point where you need my help.
Exactly.
And on a side note, obviously Ulanor becomes Armageddon,
Yeah.
and that's always there's always a weird link with the salamanders and Ulanor Armageddon
And orcs.
and
Yeah,
orcs.
I think their current chapter master is called something like Tushan or something, and he's been fighting orcs for forever.
You mean
They've all
Vulkan
got
Tushan?
apostrophes. Vulkan Tushan. Sorry.
Yeah. So there was a bit of hype. There was a bit of hype when Gazgirl came back. So that's a link to Armageddon, and then Dante and possibly stuff with Yarick, although it seems like Yarick's dead. Could that be a reintroduction for and Angron, obviously, who was banished on Armageddon in the First War for Armageddon? So there's loads of links to Ulanor Armageddon through the eras, which is interesting. But yeah, the Vulkan is gone. Nobody knows where, but he could be back at that planet protecting it or whatever. And the Forge guys are going out into the galaxy to try and find the artifacts, and they found 5.
There's 4 to go.
Yeah, they found the Chalice of Fire, which is a Forge ship said to be the maker of sublime and enduring, vast manufacturer, providing the salamanders with their weapons of war. So it's a giant spaceship, so maybe not that hard to find. On it was the Eye of Vulcan, which is another creation, which is a laser whose gaze is death. And it was recovered from the ship, and it's now put onto an orbital defense laser above Prometheus. There's the Spear of Vulcan, which I think maybe was one of the weapons he had in Isstvan 5, which is a spear which burns with such heat that it can set fire to and melt even ceramite. There's a Khazir's mantle, a drake scale cloak worn by Vulcan at Isstvan. So that's on the Forge World model, there's relics that the salamanders use, which are the drake scale cloaks, which are really strong. And they've also found the gauntlet of the Forge, which is the big power fist incorporating a heavy flamer, which is what the chapter master wears. So they still wear.
It sounds like what you're saying is wherever Vulcan is, he's naked.
Yeah.
Just waiting to be dressed.
Making something and leaving it there. Like, I found his cock ring. I found the cock ring of Vulcan.
So they're continuing to go out and find them. So it'd be interesting to know. And he is, a lot of the loyalist primarchs, they have a big backstory as to where they are and where they might have gone. But his backstory is, in terms of being lost, is like pretty weak. Like he's just hiding. He's not even in the war.
The other thing is
he's literally just hiding.
Well, he can literally wander around the webway as well, which no one else can do, because he's got that talisman of the 7 hammers still. I assume he's still got that.
Oh,
whether it works via Bluetooth or not, I don't know. It's a bit worrying.
I thought he put that on the golden throne.
Maybe it's in there now. Yeah, you could be right, actually.
And also, he can't die.
Powerful thing to have. That whoever has that has definitely got an advantage. Like if and he can't die. You're right.
So I feel like we've made the case for him. Like he's got the experience. He's trained a whole legion to look after people. He's got resilience. He seems like a nice guy. He feels bad when stuff goes wrong.
He knows how to delegate.
He does know how to delegate. Yeah. And he knows how to save people if possible. His entire army are also artificers, so they can teach people to build stuff.
I think all of these are points that Gilliman would love.
I think so too. Like the final thing that you'd need to persuade Gilliman of is why now, which is where we get into the fucking crazy theory. And here's my big theory, right? If there's gonna be an end time where he comes back, that's in line. I'm mainly saying this again just because I'm pissed off with not being able to buy him on the Games Workshop web store, is because there's a fucking evil Forge Master on the loose. And everything we've read in current 40k is building up to Vashtor the Archifane coming back and making corrupted Dark Mechanicum, Dark Forgery stuff. Maybe this is the time. Maybe we need a guy to come back and forge stuff in pure auric gold that's full of goodness and hope and morality against dark forging.
Yeah, I think he would be quite a good Primarch to come back to help in terms of the lore. He'd be a really good fit with Gilliman and the Line, I think, because I think that would work quite well. But I don't know, just because he's like Mr. Nice Guy, suddenly if he comes back, the Imperium has like a nice side to it, which I think is
that's the thing. I don't want him to come back. I'm just saying he seems like a good foil to Vashtor.
He's a difficult one, isn't he? Because in many ways he's like bigger than the faction, you know, like Salamanders are cool. They're basically guys with like flamers and stuff. I would really like to see Vulkan come back in 40k, like be the next Primarch, but I think it's incredibly unlikely, to be honest with you, in the way things are.
I think it'd be really cool. What the role that I think would be good, not that it will ever happen because they've just been like edging us for years on this. This whole King in Yellow, Abnett, Constantine in the webway / warp on a weird planet, building a new army. If Vulcan's there with him as someone that was there at the Siege of Terror protecting the Emperor, who's a true Emperor lover that Constantine liked, as his kind of right-hand man building the army, that would be really fucking cool, I think. There's going to be a big explosion of this new Constantine-led, Imperial truth-loving, straight-edged Emperor is the Emperor, let's make the Imperium great again advocate.
Yeah.
Then I think Vulcan being involved in that would be cool.
It's a good shout.
Alone, I don't think he brings too much to the table, unfortunately. I think bringing him back now is odd. He's not the Primarch I would choose because although he is really cool, he's also a little bit dour and straight edge. And we've already got two of them.
Yeah.
He's more interesting as a lore device than being on the battlefield, really. Like a lot of the stuff we've talked about isn't him fighting in battles and stuff, you know. He's a more interesting character than his fighting elements.
It's almost like the most interesting thing about him is the way he dies.
Well, yeah, but as Stoney, I think you summed it up. You said he's a Primarch things happen too.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you know, if it turned out that Vashtor had been holding him captive, making him make stuff. Like that's a cool role for him. So that another Primarch that's more exciting can come and free him. Do you know what I mean? Like
that would be cool. Or like you know what else would be cool? Because also, I mean, we've sort of talked about it in the past as well about like Kurz coming back would be really cool, but again seems like very low on the priority list for returning Primarchs. If you did like a box set, Primarch versus Vulcan 2, this time it's personal, you know, like something like that, then I'd
imagine Vulcan's gone sore and has got Kurz in a cage and he's trying to fix him.
He's just doing all nice things. He keeps opening them. He puts like a couple of pillows on his head that get gradually given more and more of a hug. He's like, I can't take it, or something like
that.
All right, so what do we think, boys? Do you think Gulliman's going to go for this plan? He's come back. He wants to set up this fair trade company. He wants to make some planets, make some weapons. Is Gilliman going to take that?
Well, I guess we better write a fax and send it over to him. Let's type it up now.
Hello. Your call cannot be taken at the moment, so please leave your message after the tone.
Hi, it's Gulliman here. Just returning your fax. And listen, folks, I've got a couple of questions, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, first, what the fuck is fair trade? I mean, do you think that people are getting paid down there in the factorials? What do you want? You want the servitors to get some money? I've got news for you, buddy. None of them are getting any fucking money. There's no money, mate. There's no money, folks. And what's the second part here? You want to make a bunch of weapons. You want to give them all a bunch of weapons. So you want to give them all a bunch of cash and weapons. I don't know, Volks. It all sounds a bit off the codex, if you know what I mean. To be honest with you, I'd rather be subscribing to Large Blast Stony on Instagram. I hear it's got really good content on there. Anyway, my last question is, where the fuck are you? You know, could you come home? Honestly, we could kind of do with a hand over here. Come over and we can chat about it more, eh? Anyway, I believe we've got a Lords of Law quiz from Welshie coming up next. Can you believe it? That's a bit different, isn't it? Alright, you got my number. I'll speak to you later.
Well up for this, but I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently. I've been getting into the Off Menu podcast. I'm sure people listen to that. It's where famous people come in and they give their menu of dreams, essentially, the things they'd love to eat. So what I've got for you boys is 7 menus of dreams from characters from 40K. And I just want you to tell me who it is. You can interrupt at any time.
All right.
Some of them are starter, main, dessert. Some have got drinks. I've mixed it up a little bit.
Nice.
All right, cool. So some of them are a little bit out there, but they're all people you know I like. So
Did you say Primarchs or anyone?
anyone.
Okay, cool.
There is one Primarch in here. Okay. Number 1. For starter, this person would like pan-fried brains of Space Marines. For dessert, he'd like the fanciest, poshest tiramisu with gold flakes. And on the side, as a drink, this is where you're going to want to interrupt quickly, he'd like a chalice of 10,000-year-old vintage sangria.
Is it? What's his name?
Dante.
Dante, well done,
Oh,
Matthew.
right.
I would have accepted the sanguivore too, whoever got there first.
He was the guy, I want to say Techless, but he was an elf, isn't he? And
Yeah, he's an elf.
Who was the old Blood Angel guy?
There's
Had the cup?
third company. I think it was like
That's the
Techless.
sanguivore you're thinking of, Stony, with the wings and the chalice.
There was a character
have
though.
expected
There was a character with
Dante.
the chalice.
Yeah, that's he's the guy that's like wearing the gold armor. He looks like an angel. I think he's called Sanguivore. He looks like Dante, but he's got wings.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah,
You're looking too
It's
much
not him.
into this.
It's not
boys.
him.
Yeah, it's
There's
not
multiple
him.
answers for all of these because I wasn't sure you'd get any of them. So, number 2, for a starter, this person would like a rum-seared shiitake basket. They'd like a sea squig chowder for main. And for dessert, a jellied snotling deckhand.
Gaskell.
Yeah, it's got.
Oh, you're on the right race. Rum-seared, sea squig, and snotling deckhand.
He's the pirate one, the freebooter guy.
I'm going to give you freebooter guy, Stoney. It's Captain Badruck.
Oh, that's him. Yeah.
One apiece. Okay, number 3. This person would like organic, health-grown ultramarine terrene to start. Lehman Russ roasted whole Imperial Guardsman as a main. And the key one, if you haven't started thinking on the right lines already, is a chilled eyeball sorbet. That's health-grown ultramarines, Lehman Russ roasted Imperial Guard, and an eyeball sorbet.
Commissar Yarrick?
A little bit bigger.
Not.
Angron.
A little bit less human.
Oh my god. What? Eyeball sorbet.
Specifically Calth and the battle for Calth.
Oh, is it a gene stealer? A Tyrannid?
Oh.
Is it Old One Eye?
Old One Eye. Stone gets it. He loves eating Calf-born ultramarines and flipping Russes. Okay. 2-1 to Stony. Number 4. This person would like Kanak floater soup with a strangle vine rosti. Flying swamp mamba baked in brain leaf.
Oh, who's the guy?
And Grok's cheese
Slimarbo.
Slimarbo.
That takes it as 2 apiece. Katachan's finest cuisine.
Him, yeah.
This person would like the purified essence of murder to start.
Curse? No, you already had a Primarch, didn't you?
The warp eye of Mercedes Olaton. And the cubed flank of Garviel Loken.
Horus.
No. The essence of
Fulgrim.
murder. The warp eye of Olaton
Khan.
and the flank of Loken. This is a very ethereal restaurant
Abaddon.
that you wouldn't
Oh, yeah.
find in real space.
It wasn't Abaddon.
No.
No.
Here's the whisper at your back.
Ulfway.
The fear in the night.
I said
The
it was
thought
not
of murder.
Kurz.
No, he's big and red.
Oh.
Angron.
Oh.
Samus, come on, boys.
Oh.
Samus. He
Oh,
eats the
murder.
essence of
The
murder.
first murder. Yeah, yeah,
Jesus.
yeah.
And he kills Loken, kind of.
I was thinking about the planet murder.
Outrageous.
Anyway.
Still 2 apiece. Number 6. This person, straight up, very simple menu, wants Stilton and crackers, tuna steak and chunky chips, and a blueberry muffin with custard.
Tau.
Gilliman.
It's Gilliman.
Oh,
Can you explain why? Blue cheese, bluefin tuna, and blueberry muffin.
Blue da-ba-dee da-ba-da.
It doesn't matter that Matt's currently winning because this point's worth 1,000,000 points, as listeners know. Number 7. This person would like skyr and loganberry compote, Harkle fermented shark, and an Arctic roll.
Lehman Russ.
Correct.
An Arctic roll.
He loves it.
Yeah.
Well, there you are. Another Lords of Lore for you there.
Nice.
Done. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll speak to you next time.
See you later.
Live long and prosper.